Welcome to the Duckling Reality World, Amos. Today we're hanging out with Amos, who is passionate about trees. Yeah, we're rolling. We can take a pause. We can restart it.
Oh,
Do you have any
good.
questions? Yeah, so what I want to do is just talk to you. We got into a conversation, and I'm not even sure how you got so into trees. But you are passionate about the trees on the island, and I know you have a background that is much more versatile than that. And accomplished, but I know that's kind of your current focus.
Well, accomplishment has nothing to do with trees, but it's for two things. One, whether or not I've been in trees, quote, for a long time, or two, is it also just a result of a puzzle, a strategy? And the answer is both. So, no, I haven't been in trees a long time, but yes, even in looking back at it, it's like when I look at my own life, some of the most defining moments did pop out. Like people ask, like, when did you get involved in trees? And it's like, who the frick knows? But then, I can tell you the story of the very first seed I planted, sugar maple in Columbus, Ohio, at our church, First Congregational Church. When they had all the little rugrats, we were all lined up, holding hands, walking out around the church block, across the street, right next door, literally. It's one lane driveway across the street, and walking around the Columbus Museum. And it was the period, it must have been February, when all the seedlings or March fall off the maple trees. And they fall down and they spin, and they look like, we call them helicopters. So we used to call them helicopter trees, not knowing, species for anything when you're 3 or 4 years old. I think we're 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And so we took those back and they let them dry out and in the window. And then we planted them in the corrugated egg cartons. So the little half cup of an egg carton, you planted in that. They put a little teaspoon of soil in there. We planted it. And of course, being rugrats, you forget about it at that age. I mean, literally 10 seconds and it's gone. And then that Easter, I remember going out the door of church and there's a hand putting right this in front of your face. Your seedling had grown and there's a sprig. And so it's like, wow, that happened. And I planted that beside our home garage, and a maple tree is the result of that. Now, my parents have moved from that house, or we moved them out of there 20 years later, after I graduated from college, I graduated from high school and college out of that house. And that's pretty much my connection to, wait, I did that. And that's a sense of place. And that's a sense of time in my lifetime, historically, so to speak. You did that when. And that's not how I got into it, but I can remember that definitively. Right. I could tell you the story of two other stories. One of the tornado tree, as we call it. I was just back in Columbus this past weekend, and my daughter was there. We're here in Alameda, where we live now, but we literally flew back there for the first time since pandemic. Oh. I didn't want to be around my mom just because I didn't want to be a person who gave her COVID after somebody gives it to you in the airplane. Right. I've been, panicked about that. But I finally flew back and got to see her and see the family, but drove back through the old hood where her house was. And sure enough, it's all still there. But I drove past this one house, which is adjacent to ours on a corner there. And it was the tornado tree. Now, it must be 120-foot tall pine tree. Wow. And every time the skies got dark and broody, and we knew that there was a tornado watch for our area, and the winds kicked up, all the kids would secretly call each other on the phone, and a key group of kids, like 10 of us, from 3 different blocks, and we would all gather at the tornado tree and climb up the tree. and the question was, who had the guts, or the something else, but who had the guts to hang on in the wind as high as you could, as long as you could, until the tornado sirens came on, which means you get, and that was the whole thing. So
that sounds wildly dangerous.
Crazy. Yeah. But it wasn't dangerous, but it's like, what can you do when you're a kid, right. And that's what it was. There wasn't any screens back then. It was either television or playing ball in the streets. But that tree's still there, our tornado tree. And then, so that's one way of, have trees always been in my life. And I can point to those things about a tree, and those memories are indelible. But it's not like, yeah, a tree fell in our backyard once. It's like we are nature and we're a part of nature. And when it comes to a tree or planting something, your brain innately remembers that. It is indelible for some reason. And that's my personal connection to it. The other side is I'm not a tree person, so to speak. This literally just happened as a strategy. Once 45, that administration prior to Biden's administration, 45 pulled us out of the Paris Agreement. And I was like, F no, not on my watch. Seriously, not on my watch. I mean, I was a campaign organizer for years, a political organizer, community activist, yada, but I was at the time a marketing consultant here in Silicon Valley and in the Bay Area. And I literally just pivoted my entire life once that happened because I could see the end game.
Right.
And a lot of people didn't make the connections. Everything else was a distraction to get to that point. Attack on women, the attack on blacks, attack on people from countries where predominantly black, attack on gays. To me, it's like, wait, all these disparate dots, what's the through line? And people like conservatism was like, no. And it came down to when the hurricane hit Puerto Rico and wiped out pretty much, so much of a protectorate of our country, basically a state, our people.
Right.
But predominantly people of color. And when he went down there, and the only image that we all saw was 45 in this small, looks like a warehouse closet with like 16 people all like cheering for him. And he's throwing paper towels at them.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, what? But I'm a poet as well. And everything in politics is symbolic, especially for a photo opportunity, photo op. In the paper towels, when you think of it, it's not like he was handing out in a gesture of empathy, care, leadership, as a president, or as we say, presidential, who literally is feeding the troops or handing out blankets to those who have been severely impacted, or just holding a baby or hugging a father who's lost something, or just sitting with people. He was throwing an article that was disposable, one that has to be used by the user. Therefore, you're going to clean up this yourself.
And then throw all the evidence of cleaning it up away like it never happened.
And there's nothing about resources to sustain them. It was just, you're going to clean it up. But that was symbolic to me, saying that was a signal to everybody from a capitalistic standpoint. We're going to sell them everything they need for them to get out of their own misery, to find comfort, food, shelter. It meant nothing was being given to them. And so, and sure enough, the water that never got distributed or was there, but was never given to them. After they left, someone found a whole literally supply of just crates, not crates. What do you call them? Yeah. Crates or pallets full of those bottles of water. And it didn't break my heart as much as it was emblematic of that relationship of that administration with our own peoples or with any peoples. And so that really made me, that showed me that, which I did know, climate was the single largest driver of capitalism, and would be into the future in terms of climate impacts.
Right.
It's not sea level rise. Number one killer in climate is urban heat. Number one killer worldwide, urban heat, due to both lack of trees and the fact that climate's out of whack. Prolonged heat days, unreal, unfathomable, over 100 degrees. And so when we look at that, to me, that was a sign that I really felt compelled to come up with a simple strategy. And when I saw him take us out of Paris Agreement, I literally kind of brooded over it. And then what's her name happened that year in 2019? Greta Thunberg. School strike for climate started the August before, in August 2018, or somewhere around there, July, August. And then in 2019, she called for a global strike for climate in August or September 19th through the 21st worldwide. And, I helped support kids from high schools to leave high schools. Any that did, we chaperoned, shall we say.
Yeah.
Over to San Francisco. And it was an amazing just show of support and kids who got it.
Right.
This is going to be their future. And after that, I had read this article either in Grist magazine, 17 Yes magazine, one of those far left, magazines. And just some clickbait title, "The world's going to get a lot hotter. Here's how you can survive it." And I was like, oh my God, really? You guys just put that title out there. So I read it anyway. But but it was Katharine Hayhoe, Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, who had led the U.S. in the National Climate Assessment for over 8 years and got the Pentagon to declare that climate is the number one national security threat. Not Russia, not China, not internet trolls, not a meteoroid that's going to hit us and wipe us out. Climate change specifically. Back in like 2012. And I was like, wait, what? How come we haven't changed our budgets completely to decarbonize everything, all our decision making, everything? And the answer is we hadn't.
Right.
But why isn't anybody talking about that? And I read that article, but it really impressioned me to really start thinking about what I can do to impact both climate anxiety on peoples who felt, oh my God, I need to do something, but nobody knew what to do. And it literally hit me one morning and I'm like, what is one thing that you can do that you have a sense of agency over, that makes you feel good, that you can do? And I kept, repeating that and thinking over. Right then, this little tree in my mind's eye popped in my hand, that tired little metaphor of a little handful of dirt with a seedling popping out of it like a pine tree.
Right.
Literally in my mind's eye popped into my hand and I was like, you're kidding me. Literally, I was not freaked out, but it's like, what? And it was that palpable.
Right.
And that's when I knew, it's like, of course, it's sitting right in front of us. The greatest strategies in life, the greatest strategies in the universe are right in front of us. Usually the simplest things.
Right. And
that's when I decided I want to put a tree in every person's hand. It's a little more, the article involved in that has to do with neuroscience and narrative therapy. It's what it's all about. How do psychologists and psychiatrists get a severely depressed person? What's their role to heal themselves?
Okay.
And it's about brain waves, and not brain waves, but the brain and healing the brain and gates that are closed and gates that need to be open, and how you perceive the world as negative and threatening and imbrooding versus how does a healthier mind and person do that? And what is a process to that? Narrative therapy or talk therapy, or otherwise called couch therapy, is what psychiatrists, psychologists, talk you through. And it actually releases hormones, endorphins in the brain, or hormones of dopamine or oxytocin. And those have both a motivational effect and a healing effect. Oxytocin is the love hormone, or feeling loved by something or love for something, or empathy, so to speak.
Right.
Deep empathy. And or dopamine, which is the pleasure hormone as we know it, feeling liked by something or pleased or pleasured or feeling good about or for something. But dopamine has a hook, an addictive component. Right. So it's like, oh, you like that scoop of ice cream, or the third scoop of ice cream, or that empty pint now of ice cream, right? It's not that you really like the ice cream. That's the dopamine kicking in. It makes you just keep eating, the addictive component. So people really think they have choices, but it's like, no, that's your
chemistry.
Yeah, it's your chemistry kicking in, your neurobiology. But the same thing, whether you're flying a kite, riding a bike, playing with a ball, holding a baby, or planting a tree. So it's healing and has the same addictive component. Doing one thing where you have agency over it. And then talking about that. And then rinse and repeat actually heals Nature heals.
Right.
And so I knew that, and I read that in that article. I didn't know that. I read that in that article, that Yes Magazine, Grist Magazine, or whatever it was. And right then, after that tree popped in my hand that one Sunday morning, I decided, I want to plant the planet one tree at a time, one person at a time, but at scale. And so this journey since that October of 2019, when we first launched, to today, is all about that. People call it a project, or your one of the three words I say I hate hearing: project, or product, or I forget what the other one is. But it's this is a mission. There is no planet B.
Right.
These are not memes. We only have until 2030 to not just get it right, get it done. Get all these natural investments or nature-based investments. I'm sitting here looking at your living green wall that you have.
It's fake.
I know, but it's still.
I wish it was living.
No, but you think it's fake. It's still having the same neurobiological effect. Why? It's called biophilia, which is just for a human to see green, or be surrounded by green, or sitting amongst green, or trees, or lush plants, or looking at it like a moss wall or a living wall, reduces the diastolic rate of the blood pressure in 15 to 20 minutes back to normal.
That's insane.
No, that's nature. We are nature. We've never been apart from nature. We like to think we are, which is how we got so screwed up to begin with.
Right.
So by centering nature between social justice and racial justice, that is the framework for my organization, 100K Trees for Humanity. It's literally understanding the neurobiological theory of change, which is we need to surround ourselves with trees at scale for us to heal as a people, spiritually, socially, nationally, individually.
Right.
And to the quote, rinse and repeat, is to share that story with others and invite them to plant trees with you, because it is addictive. It's awesome. It's a cool phenomenon to watch volunteers, but they get halfway into a hole they're digging. I go hole to hole to hole to hole and talk to every volunteer at every single planting. How's it going? What does it need? Hey, you really want to hold a shovel like that? Let's try this. You'd be surprised. So many kids have never held shovels.
Yeah.
Kids have never held a shovel in their life. And some adults too.
Right.
We're living in not exactly a city, but, never held a shovel. And so digging it's a new thing. But the real thing is getting halfway through a hole and somebody saying, so when's the next tree planting? It's like, dude,
let's finish this one first.
Let's you don't even have your tree out of the pot yet. It's a cool phenomena to watch happen. That's the dopamine talking. And it's so cool. Or that they either said, when's the next tree planting? Or they say, can we get another tree? And usually it's that one. It's like, hey, can we get a second tree? And you don't even have the hole for the first one yet. Or when's the next planting? It's like, just go sign up. And people will literally leave their hole, go sign up. But I love the phenomena. And that's when I first saw the phenomena kick in at our very first tree planting, like October 2020, during the pandemic, during a smoke emergency here in Northern California. But it was weird. But when I realized what was happening, I realized that was the article. No, that was the dopamine effect of feeling pleased, but the brain knowing.
Right.
It is literally, this is a pleasurable thing for one reason or another. And I want to go do it again. But watching people audibilize that.
Right. That's amazing.
It was so cool. It was so cool. So long-winded answer too, but nothing's ever simple. And because I really do believe it's in the context of the narrative of the natural processes of which we are a part of that we need to share. We really do need to look at how we can look at the imperative of how do we cool the planet below 1.5 degrees Celsius, according to the UN scientists, by 2030. We now have 6 years, 6 months, and 23 days as of today. 25 days as of today to get, in America, 68 billion trees in the ground. In the world, 1 trillion trees.
Wow.
But
that's not actually because of the amount of people in the world. If, like you say, if everyone plants a tree, then it's nothing. That's a Sunday afternoon of getting this planet
and
healed.
people are like, how can you plant a trillion tree? Well, let's talk about that. Okay, well, let's talk about that.
Right.
Okay, right.
But it doesn't seem in theory. It seems like such a wild idea.
Oh, there's no such thing as theory. There's no such thing as theory. They're dreams. To theorize, no. This is simple math.
Yeah.
1 tree, I'm here to plant the planet, 1 tree at a time, which means 1 person at a time. Give you a tree, you're healing.
Right.
People are like, healing towards what? It's like, don't need to. Why? She's going to plant another tree. I don't have to ask.
Right.
I need to walk away. I just need to put a tree in your hand and walk away. My job is done. How many other people can we do that to? Now, what's the math? So scientists give us till 2030 to plant 1 trillion trees in order to pull the amount of carbon and sequester it out of the atmosphere, and actually to restore the climate, which is where our climate comes from. Over 60+% come from the evaporation of water from the ground by trees and plants, flora, as it's called, over land mass worldwide. And so, so let's look at the math real quick. And the answer, I'm going to tell you how many trees per person per day. Okay. On a managed sense, in other words, if we actually say we all didn't just plant a tree, but we hired people to do this for 6 years, 6 months, and
25 days.
Thank you. But notice that's a number, right?
Right.
So we know that's how many years and days, right? Right. How many trees does it take? So I did the math. And so in America, we need to plant 68 billion trees. But we only have enough nurseries and garden centers, the things that grow the seedlings, and then give it either to foresters or they send it to local nurseries who in turn resell them to us. And so we only have something like 1,700 and change nurseries and garden centers nationwide. They grow 1.25 billion seedlings a year, 1.25 billion. We have 6 years that literally comes up to approximately 9.1 billion, or 1.25, 1.3. It's about 9.1 billion trees that are only going to grow between now and December 31st, 2029. So 68 billion, how do you plant that? Well, for us, we know for the urban context, the goal is to get every urban city nationwide up to 30% tree canopy by 2030. So how many trees does that take? Per urban canopy, on average, per 75,000 people, it takes approximately 100,000 trees, approximately.
Okay.
And we studied a consultant report from West Oakland of 2012, City of Alameda of 2017, 2018, their climate action plan consultant who said Alameda could sustain on average 1 new tree per capita resident by 2030. We had 76,000 people were projected to be 79,000 by 2030, which approximately was 80,000 people. And we read the city of Fremont, which had a very similar metric. And I'm like, wait a second, 3 disparate cities, completely different, or in areas. West Oakland is not a city, it's an area in the city of Oakland. But they have 70,000 people. But how can all 3 reports say each one of these areas end up being approximately 1 new tree per capita resident at about 70 plus, almost 80,000 people? And I said, boom, the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. What's that? The 80-20 rule? People have heard, the 80-20 rule, the 80-20 principle. What I noticed in 2018 and 2019, I was on 2017, I joined our local climate action or environmental task force here in the city of Alameda called CASA. And we were going over reports and looking at stuff. And we realized that on tree planting and, quote, nature-based investments and other things, the city was consistently hitting, and it's kind of interesting, but it is what it is, 80% a goal on so many different things, or we're funding it at 80%. And it's like 20% was, missing underfunding. No, like,
right.
It just never hit goal. And it's like, okay, and you just sum it up. It's the 80-20 principle in operation. It happens. But then I noticed this happen with the report. I'm like, wait a second. If our consultants say on average, we could sustain 1 new tree per capita resident on average. And that February of 2019, our environmental task force got our city council to draft a resolution and pass it in record time, literally under 45 days, a climate emergency declaration, which declared what is happening in the climate above us and around us right now as not normal. And therefore, this is a state of emergency we need to act on. And it's called the Climate Emergency Declaration Resolution. We passed one here in the city of Alameda. We passed it in the county of Alameda. Cities all over the Bay Area and the world were passing these climate emergency declarations to declare that this is an emergency so that they can marshal resources to run them through their climate action plans and begin to act in an emergency mode for climate, for the protection of the safety and the health and welfare of the residents and people and the planet. And so I said, look, if we're in an emergency, we can't afford to do average. And if 80% on a bell curve, point your fingers down to the ground and then sweep your fingers upward to 12 o'clock. So pointing down at 6 o'clock on a clock, you sweep it up to 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock is average on a bell curve. And then you would sweep it over to the other side from 12 o'clock all the way back over from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down to 6. That would be the high side of the average, right? And if average is 80,000 people, I said, oh my gosh, that means we probably could maximally sustain 150 to 160,000 trees. But on average, 1 new tree per capita resident, I said, as this is a climate emergency, we cannot afford to be average or do anything average. First, for the planet, because we have to center nature first. And we learned that from our native brothers and sisters. Right. Everybody remembers Standing Rock, right? Standing Rock. Oh, remember Standing Rock. It's like, no, don't remember Standing Rock. Remember the message of the messengers in Standing Rock, our native brothers and sisters who showed us that and told us that water is life and that air is sacred and that the forests shall provide the bounty of life so as we steward them. So as we steward them. We are stewards of the earth, and that is the imbalance that has caused climate change. We are not stewarding the earth. We are plundering it. We're exploiting it. We're raping it. We have done everything but taking care of the earth, the planet, and nature within it. And that's the imbalance that we're living right now. And so how do we restore that balance? We need to become the stewards again. And so back to the numbers. So we know that 68 billion, it's going to sound good. 68, there's a microphone hit. There's a new one for me.
That out.
Yeah. So 68 billion for 100,000 people. We're not going to do 80,000. What we need to do is add back in that other 20%.
Right.
Which is literally where the name of our organization came from. We went from 80,000 trees and I said, we cannot afford to be average. We're going to kick back in that other 20% for the planet. Mm. And so it's 20% for nature. So we became 100,000 trees for humanity. And that was our launch. In December 2nd of 2019, we declared we were 100K trees for humanity. And we were going to plant the planet. On a city by basis, 100,000 trees. So we need 100,000 trees per urban community, approximately 75,000 people each in a neighborhood. If there's more in your city, great, but break it down per 75,000. How many trees do you need total for your city? to get your average tree canopy up from here in California, the average tree canopy, I believe, is 15%. We need to get that up to 30%. That's about, 100,000 trees on that ratio basis. So in a year or in that 6-year period, how do we plant 100,000 trees? The answer is if we just made it 7 years for the sake of the math, since we're in April now. No, we're in May now. But add the first 4 months back on. For a 7-year period, we need to plant 14,298. I memorized it. I'm not doing the math in my head. I used to be good. I'm not thinking anymore. But you need to plant 14,298 trees a year for 7 years to get 100,000 trees. And people are like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's a lot of trees. Why? The city of Alameda here, this little island city we live on that we're interviewing in right now, is currently exceeding its previous tree planting plan before 2017-18, this current climate action plan. Before they were doing 200 trees a year, and people are like, wow, that's a lot of trees. 200 may be a lot of trees, but if you're not planting trees, there's a lot of trees. But let's get to the numbers again. 200 trees a year. They increased it up to 300 trees a year. Don't ask me if they're hitting goal or if they're hitting 80%. All I can say is read the reports.
Right.
But so that's 300 trees a year. The city of Berkeley is planting 700 trees a year. And people are like, it's Berkeley. They're always progressive. Well, they are. They're always out ahead. Well, kind of, sometimes, but not always. But they're planting 700 trees a year. That seems like a lot of trees.
But it's not enough.
Then there's the city of Hayward. They're planting, on the books, they're planting 1,000 trees a year. Halo, Hayward. Yep. So, and then they've only done it for 2 years. 2021, they planted 1,000 trees. 2022, they didn't hit their number. They planted 2,100 plus trees. I was like, wait, what? They're blowing nobody even heard that they were doing this. And so I was like, wow, 2,000. People are like, wow, that's a lot. It's like, well, let's look at the math. If you're going to hit 100,000 trees, you need to be planting 14,298 trees a year. Divided by how many months in a year? 12. That's 1,190 trees a year. Let's just round it up to 1,200. So 1,200 trees a year. Or not a year, 1,200 trees a month divided by 12. How do I know that? Again, I'm remembering my slides. My mind is not that sharp to do the math that quick. And that's 1,200 trees a month, 1,190. Divided by 4 weeks in a month, that's 300 trees a week. Now, 7 days are in a week. But even if we just made it a 5-day work week, just from a work standpoint, we know it's a crisis, but we're only going to do it for 5 days a week. How many trees does it take per day? And the answer is 5. 300 divided by 5 is 60 trees a day.
And that seems doable.
Doable. How many persons does it take to plant a tree, or how many trees can a person plant? What we found out over 3 years of planting trees now, 2 years and 7 months, volunteers plant 1 tree per hour religiously. If you got 80 volunteers and you have 160 trees, we know we're going to be done in 2 hours flat. And that's it. We're done in 2 hours. And the metric is, it's awesome. We know exactly. It's a 20-minute warm up, introductions, welcomes, donuts, coffee. You're into it, and divide the number of trees by volunteers. And that's how many hours it's going to take. You are done right on time.
Right.
And then there's cleanup afterward. You're done right on time. But that's volunteers. Now, in our model, the 100K Tree Urban Greenbelt Initiative model, when you hire people, we learned from like the New York City Million Tree Campaign and Friends of the Urban Forest in San Francisco and Seattle's group, a paid tree worker plants 3 trees per hour.
Wow.
How many trees per hour in an 8-hour workday can you get in the ground? And how many people does it take to plant 60 trees? The answer is 3. 3 people, 3 trees per hour, 8-hour workday. You can go home, even though we know it's a crisis, right? But you don't see governments throwing money at this like we did with COVID. I'm not here to question that at all.
I am.
No, I'm not, because that becomes a recursive problem of
Right.
inaction.
Because then it becomes about the why and not the getting shit done.
Why are you chasing philosophy when you already have the answer? You're trying to satisfy yourself for the fact of, look at what they're not doing. I'm sorry, no. Here, in the meantime, take this shovel
and go plant a tree.
And here's the seedling, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Are you planning with us this weekend?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, wait. When's our next tree planting? June 3rd.
All right, I can definitely do that.
June 3rd.
Yeah.
Good. See what I did?
Yeah.
Good. See what I did?
I did.
Right. So you can always ask questions all your life.
Right.
At some point, you got to pick up a shovel or you got to pick up a hose and you got to just point it and you got to put out the fire. And eventually you're going to realize that you aren't holding the hose by yourself, right, and that somebody else literally is leaning against your back, because the pressure of that hose is enormous to put out a fire. It is enormous. It is not a one-person affair. And then you're going to realize that somebody else is holding the hose, pushing against the person who's pushing against your back. And that is what we're in right now.
Right.
As Greta Thunberg said, we have to act now as if our house is on fire, because it is.
It is. Why do you think so many people don't understand this?
Everybody understands it. That's why we have climate anxiety right now. Just research it. Climate anxiety. And it's still on the rise. And it's because people feel hopeless, because they don't feel empowered to act. Although the answer is in, potentially, the palm of their hands. So what can you do right now? Get up, literally go to your store, buy a $30 tree at Home Depot, at Osh, Outdoor Supply Hardware, at Ace, at your local nursery,
right,
at a tree store. Buy it. $30, $50, $70. Just buy one tree and plant it in your yard, 6 feet away from a wall, 6 feet away from a foundation or your neighbor's property line, because when it grows, it's going to expand. But the thing is, plant a tree. And that is the most important thing that anyone can do now for the next 6 years. It's not self-serving, my statement here. This is existential, literally, for not the sake of the planet. The planet's going to live. The question is it only going to be 20% of us that do? And where? It ain't going to be Mars, because we don't have that built out yet. And it ain't going to be underground again.
Right.
You know? So the thing is, before we get there and before we pass the point of no return, we're here to help people plant the planet.
Yeah. And you had an interesting, the first time we talked about this, you explained to me, like, and just, I keep thinking about how you say the trees are healing. Like when you think about driving down a tree laned road versus driving down a not tree laned road, like the difference in your drive, like people will, or your living space.
Or your living space.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, so why is it that so many, is it just because of money that so many places, like my apartment complex, there's turf, we don't have grass.
It's strictly money.
And is it?
It's maintenance.
But do they realize that it's the trade-off that they're doing?
No, they don't. Most people don't. I mean, this is where I jump to my other slide. I usually jump to a slide from the Nature Conservancy. It's a brilliant, beautiful slide. It's a process slide, but it shows trees have what we call ecosystem services or benefits. Mm-hmm. The services, specific services like they provide. What do trees provide for us? They provide shade. It's the first thing everybody will tell you. 2 different ways they provide shade. Well, one, biomass, meaning just their bodies block the radiation of the sun. By blocking the radiation of the sun, just like a hand does or a wall does, what's on the opposite side is cooler as a result of not being in the direct path of that radiation. Trees have, one, a shade effect, but they also have a second cooling effect. What you learn is called climate, but it's called evapotranspiration. So basically, they suck water up from groundwater all day long.
Right.
That's what trees do. That's they're biofilters. They filter water from the ground and breathe it out into the atmosphere as mist, vapor. And that literally becomes our climate in the form of what's called a microclimate. climate. In the Bay Area, we hear of microclimates.
Right.
Most other places across America, I've never heard of a microclimate on the news, but here in the Bay Area, it's like, well, the microclimate of this area, like
I'd
it could
never
be
heard of
raining in Novato in the North Bay, and it could be like foggy over in Sausalito, Marin, and it's always splotchy and foggy down in San Francisco, and obviously in San Jose, it's like burning and dry hot. But we have all these different microclimates here because of our topography.
Right.
And everywhere all around the world, as I said before, there are these microclimates. The area immediately above your area where you live, your geography, is your microclimate. And 66%, it's 66, 63, I get my numbers wrong, but it's right in there. 66% of all of what sustains that microclimate comes from the flora below.
Okay.
In return, 63% of all local precipitation comes from the microclimate. Let me repeat it again. The microclimate's creation is a result of the sum total of flora below and the amount of evapotranspiration that provides the establishment of that microclimate, as opposed to the macroclimate, which is called our jet stream,
right.
The large water cycle versus the small water cycle. And so, so with that microclimate, the more trees we have and or plant, the more moisture, right? Are you starting to see?
Yep.
In other words, what drought?
Right.
Plant more trees. 2 examples. One thing. First, again, the numbers. 1 mature coast live oak tree. She transpires through evapotranspiration, transpires 300 to 500 gallons, which means 400 gallons of water. When?
Wow.
When?
From the groundwater?
In what period?
Oh, I have no idea.
A year? A month?
I feel like it's probably a year, but you're so excited it's probably way less. It can't be a day. It can't be. A week?
400 gallons a day.
400 gallons a day.
400 gallons a day. That's a gallon every 32 minutes.
Wow.
No. Climate. So every time we feel, second thing, there's shade, but that climate, that mist, you don't see it. You know, those little sprayers at the grocery store right in the vegetable section? That's it's micro, like microdized water, right? It's not the water that cools you. It's the water hitting the air and it pulls the heat. It's called latent heat. We call it humidity, but scientists call it latent heat. So it pulls the heat out of the air. The change in temperature is experienced as coolness.
Yeah.
That process can lower temperatures anywhere between 8 and 20 degrees just from the water vapor.
Yeah.
Another 8 to 20 degrees.
That's huge.
Versus the blocking of heat. It's a great study from Dr. Janet Harton, a colleague of mine on our CAL FIRE board, Urban Forestry Advisory Committee. Dr. Harton, with her colleagues, did a study in Coachella Valley, which we all know for the Coachella Festival, but it's a desert, y'all. I mean, it's a hot desert, right? Temperatures, they put down AstroTurf there to keep it cool. The organizers, now you say there's no trees here in your patio area, this whole open area, it's vacuous. It's money. But they thought they were being eco-conscious by putting down AstroTurf, where it would be cooler than the rock that was there. But they weren't going to cart in trees, but they put down AstroTurf. The AstroTurf was actually hotter. So it still retains a lot of heat. What she did was a study, and they did put up trees, and they realized they found from their results, trees can lower temperatures 60 to 90 degrees. Wow. The shade. So look up Dr. Janet Harton. She's with University of California, A&R. UC A&R is her department that she works in. But it's not like it's a brilliant study. It's the fact that somebody just studied it.
Right.
And the results are out there. So trees save lives. Okay. It reduces urban heat temperatures by absorbing the radiation instead of having the asphalt absorb it and hold it all day long and emit it slowly back into the atmosphere all night long. where you don't get relief from the heat.
Right.
And it becomes oppressive, and it actually increases desiccation of the land, which means drying out of the earth itself.
Right.
Because it's just too hot. And so it's evaporating. The whatever moisture is in the earth will evaporate. And so it's trees. There are over 26 different ecosystem services. They create shade. They create climate in the environment. Trees create oxygens. Trees filter with their bodies, their leaves, their sticks, their twigs and stems, dust and microparticles, i.e. air pollution. Number one source of air pollution, transportation and transit. Transportation and transit nationwide. Okay. 70% of all of our air pollution from that system, from those sources. Trees filter that. The only trees that actually suck out the volatile organic compounds that come off of like diesel fumes and toxins and in the air are conifers. Your pine, your spruce, your cedars, your sequoias, redwoods, as you will. Those actually absorb those gases. Therefore, the oxygen they put off is pure.
Yeah.
So they actually filter the air. Boom, yet a second time. And so, I mean, it's exciting what trees do. Yeah, once you learn all this, we've all heard these different things, but when you tie it all together, it all comes down to one thing, a tree.
Right.
Trees, the most treed communities, one, are your wealthiest communities. And it's not because they can afford it. It's because the other communities were actually kept from having trees planted there. Resources were kept from planting trees there just because the resources were all sent to the other neighborhoods historically over time. I mean, a great New York Times article on that, on the redlining of communities and the relationship of, quote, environmental justice, the relationship of resources and the lack of city trees, otherwise called street trees, in our Black and brown communities across the entire nation.
Right.
So when you look at that, there was a study in 2015, I think it was released in 2016, right here in Northern California by the U.S. Department of Agriculture Forestry Service. Greg McPherson was the lead researcher on that out of Davis, and used Kaiser Permanente's data. It was scrubbed of private information, but they participated in this study where they had all their health information run through their study. And they found that per zip code, the wealthiest zip codes, the wealthiest communities had better health indicators and lower negative indicators. And people are like, well, yeah, they can afford for the food and, they're organic and they just have better lifestyles. And it's like, no, all that is BS. It strictly came down to one correlative factor, the number of street trees per that zip code. And people are like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, cardiac disease,
Right.
upper respiratory disease, asthma, chronic headaches, absenteeism at work, absenteeism at school was directly tied to the number of trees or the absence of trees in your community. Why? Trees create oxygen. Here in where we live, Alameda County in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, where we're sitting, Alameda County, there's an unincorporated area just due east of San Leandro, due west of Hayward, called the Eden area. And it's comprised of like 5 different areas: the San Lorenzo, Ashland, Cherryland, Castro Valley, and Fairview, and the Fairview Heights, I think it's called. And in those areas, the Ashland area, it was pointed out to me by one of the supervisors, board of supervisors staff here in Alameda County, the Ashland area has the highest teenage maternal mortality rates in the Bay Area. I was like, wait, what?
Oh, so they're dying before they even get to childbirth, which normally in this country, our maternal mortality rate is during childbirth is higher than any other country in the world.
Which still blows my mind.
Which, yeah, women can have babies in fields in other countries and have a higher rate of success and livelihood. And then on top of that, if you're a Black woman in this country, your mortality rate spikes even more, which is absolutely ridiculous.
I was going to say Black and brown women, women of color.
Yeah.
The rates are the highest.
Yeah.
And I want to say it's 3-to-1.
I think
it's 3-to-1.
I think you might
and
be
so,
right.
we don't need to go there with the whys.
Right.
We already know whys. It has to do with bias. It has to do with a lot of other factors.
Yeah.
And it's not their own personal health. It's the environment. And that's what they found here. And this one staffer impressed upon me. She was like, we need you to give us a proposal to plant trees. Why? And she said, because this is the reality. And she says, these are the rates here. And I said, with kids, with teens? She goes, yes. And then when I did the homework, literally, and I found this one study by the U.S. Department of Forestry. I believe it was that study. Maybe, I hope I get that study correct. I always tend to correlate the two studies incorrectly. But the one study that found the Kaiser study, I told you they used the Kaiser data that showed that result. It became painfully clear. We knew it existed, but the correlation right here in our own backyard was strictly tied to the absence of trees in their community relative to those on right here in the east side of Alameda,
right,
which is about 27%. Okay, 27% when I first, found this in late 2020, early 2021, late 2020. And so it behooves us for our own public safety first. We need to plant trees to protect people. It's a public safety issue, just like with COVID.
Right.
We need to move at scale with haste. This is an emergency. And then for public health, the data shows, this is it for health.
Right.
Trees create oxygen. The number of trees on your street, not in your front yard and backyard, not in the Highlands or in Tahoe. This number of trees on city streets determines who's got the oxygen to have health and a healthy life. Not be complicated, not feel nauseous or apathetic, not apathetic, but just not have the energy. You don't have clean air and you don't realize it. And so again, this is why we're planting trees. This is what we're doing. And this is a mission for public safety and health and for climate. And it's an equity concern.
Right.
So yeah, the fact that we can do it and people get the same smile that you do when I just told you, you're doing it now.
Yeah.
And I just I put out, all I got to do is put out my hand and you're like, yeah, I already get it. Why?
Yeah, let's
because
do it.
In your mind's eye, the tree just pops there.
Yeah.
And that's not the fact, but yeah, it is because you're reliving the same experience and that's the dopamine kicking off and the oxytocin and you're healing just by reliving an experience that you have a sense of agency over one thing that gives you positive feedback. And if it's tied to a tree and how many people plant it, if it's 60 trees a day in a 5-day work week in 8 hours a day, we only need to pay 3 people in every community of approximately 75,000 people to be planting those trees. That is what it comes down to. Those are the numbers.
That seems like such an easy fix.
Right?
Like it seems asinine that we're not already doing that.
It's not that it seems. This is language, and this is breaking you out of that matrix. It is. It's not that it seems, as you said.
It is.
Right? It is. And now you're in a different world.
Yeah.
So that's where I said, I don't need to invite you to come plant trees. You're going to go plant trees, or you're going to save the acorns, or the walnuts, or the black walnuts, or the chestnuts, or the buckeyes. You're going to save those seeds and you're going to drop them and put them in pots and you're going to give them away to friends. Why? That's what answers the other part of the climate crisis, the nursery crisis. How do we get the other 80% in the ground? The answer is we put out buckets of seeds for squirrels. And what do squirrels do? And stellar jays and ravens, what do? They take them and people are like, well, they eat them. It's like, no, they go plant them. And it's like, why do they plant them? They know that's where food comes from in future. And people are like, no, it's just a toy. It's a game. They're animals. They're stupid. It's like, yeah,
they're not.
Hold my beer. Yeah. So and then watch this documentary on the octopus or the dolphin or even a dog or even a spider and look at the intelligence. Why? Because we just think we're supreme. Again, that's human centered.
Right.
When you center nature and you remove yourself from the equation and assume an enormous amount of humility, to just shut up and watch other things and respect them. I mean, we'll start respecting other peoples that way as well.
Right.
But they plant seeds. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights activist and father and parent and incredible human being, I think had been released from the Selma jail and was coming out of his house, and some reporter shoves a microphone in front of his mouth, because that's the way it was back in those days. You just put a microphone up and you asked your question, and you got the tape rolling in the box on the side of your hip. And he said, Dr. King, how can you do this day in and day out? Preach about love your brother as yourself and the beloved community. And when they're setting dogs on you, they're setting your houses on fire, they're even blowing up your churches and still hanging people. How can you preach that? And I guess Dr. King stopped and paused, looks up and says, even if I knew the world would end tomorrow, I'd still go out today in my front yard and plant my apple tree. It's not that a tree is a sign and a symbol of hope. It is the audibilization, not the articulation, the ability to audibilize it, bring it, manifest it through voice. What the brain knows, what the squirrels know, what the ravens know, and what little kids know. You say, everybody take one acorn at the schools. We were at the Montessori schools 2 weeks ago. 3 Montessori schools, 3 days in a row. Right here now, I mean, it's cute. They're little nuggets. They're cute, cute, cute. And they ask the cutest questions. And you're like, yes, I have a favorite tree. Do you have a tree? Do you have a favorite tree? What's your tree? I have a tree too. No, you don't. I do. Little kids are great. I love them. They were like ages 4 to 3.5 to like 5. And at this 3 Montessori schools. And we say, okay, everybody take an acorn, because we got them. We were asked to come in. 100K Trees was asked to come in by the Child Unique Montessori schools and get each kid to start their own tree nursery by planting their own trees. Their Montessori schools are all on board with 100K Tree mission, and they're actually starting classroom nurseries and having the kids raise the trees that, just like I told you I did when I was the same thing with our sugar maples. And so I have in my hand the acorns, and I say, okay, everybody just take one. And the first kid takes one, the second, third, fourth, fifth, take one. And we get all the way around to like Aaron or Andrew, Aaron or something like that. And I said, okay. And he goes to take, and he just like reaches in and takes one. And then all of a sudden his other 3 fingers curl around the others and start pulling them all. And I'm like, no. I'm like, just take one. And I'm like trying to resist and like keep his little fingers in there. So he only takes out one. And I didn't want to like pinch him or anything. And he's like looking at me like his face isn't changing, but he knows what his hand's doing. And he's like like poker face. And his teacher starts going, now, Aaron. And I know that tone. And I was like, no, he's just a baby. I'm like, come on, really? And she just looks at me and I said, because they're squirrels. And he took one. And I told everybody, you can have a second one afterward. And they were all okay with that.
Right. Because
they're all trying to rationalize, whose tree? You don't have a tree in that tree. And how come he gets to make more?
Right.
So they're kids. They don't get that. And so because they're squirrels, math, science, now history. The city of New York launched, I think in 2010, its Million Tree campaign. I think it was a 5-year campaign that culminated and finished in 2015. I think it was chaired by Bette Midler. Okay. Bette Midler, the phenomenal Bette Midler, if I hadn't said that, diva. Actress, singer, all that. Bette Midler. And apparently 10 months out, somewhere around there, the campaign ran out of money.
Oh.
And it is not inexpensive to plant a tree in New York. And they were hell-bent on hitting that million tree goal. And they needed to for, again, public safety, public health, but also for climate. And they ran out of money. And apparently Midler picked up the phone and something like within 72 hours, I think, raised the other $700,000. Now with her A-list, I could have been just a flip of a coin with somebody else. But
could have been 3 people.
Yeah, 3 people, and they had to argue over which one was really going to write the check.
Yeah.
But it's not the fact. It's the point.
Right.
It's the thing is they raised it and they closed out, I think like a month early. They had 10 months to go and they finally closed it out. So 6-9 months later, they did an audit of the Million Tree Campaign. And it's online. You can read the report. And they didn't end up planting, truth be told, 1 million trees.
Tell me they planted more. 80-20 rule?
Squirrels, neurobiology, dopamine.
How many trees did they plant?
You tell me.
2 million?
Yes!
Yes!
God, you're good! God, you're so good! Right?
That's amazing.
No.
No, I mean, it's not enough.
No. And you're like, I should go to Vegas. Yes, you should. Why? You nailed the number.
Mm.
And it's not the fact that you nailed the number, because squirrels, human nature, we are nature. Squirrels and kids, we are nothing more than a taller, crustier version of that same kid. Science, we know about neurobiology and the dopamine. You can't stop eating that pint of Rocky Road. 2 million. We have all we need it takes to plant the planet before 2030. Following our plan, you can hit it consistently if you only pay the minimum.
Right.
3 people. Why? 3 for math out there. 3 people per hour planting 3 trees is 9 trees per hour. In an 8-hour workday, that's 72 trees. Oh, but we're going to back an hour out paid for lunch.
Right.
So we lose 9 trees. So that brings us down to 61 trees in that 8-hour workday that they can hit. 3 people paid living wages, right? Yeah. So, and we need to link them up in a workforce development plan or a program. Right. That's what our model does. But yeah, forget about talking about my model. But I mean, it's doable. We got this. As a climate, as a species, as humans, as sentient beings. We don't need to look at that number. We just need to know the fact that we can do anything, but we got this.
Right.
We can do this.
There's no reason why we shouldn't be hitting those goals and getting this shit done. Because just on your point, like you plant the trees, the community gets healthier. The environment gets healthier. Like everyone benefits. For every 100,000 trees, 2 slides. I speak in terms of slides, folks. Sorry, I have to use my PowerPoint even when I'm talking in my own mind. But I say 2 slides because I'll give you the URL to this PowerPoint. But 2 slides. 1, money does grow on trees. Sorry, Dad in heaven. Money does grow on trees. Trees are green assets. The wealthy have known that. The highest return of those ecosystem services is not on carbon sequestration. It's not on air purification or filtration. It's not on the stormwater storage. 50% of all trees, 50% of a tree is water. 50%. So that's like when a forest fire happens, you see trees are usually all that's left. Like some of them are like dead trees, but when pictures that I've seen of a forest fire, the trees are still standing.
So, yeah. What's dry burns. But
like those trees
I never thought of that. I've never thought of that. I know some bark is, quote, fire resistant, but I've never thought of that in terms of because of the water mass.
I would think
that's an interesting observation and a potential supposition.
Which also means if we have more trees, maybe we have less forest fires.
If we have fewer trees, we would have more?
No, if we have more trees, we'll have less. Because the trees are keeping the moisture in the air, so not as much would be burning.
No, it's true. That's true. Well, it's not directly, I don't think it's as simple as having more trees will have fewer forest fires. But having more trees, the whole point is to restock the globe's trees. There used to be 6 trillion trees. Pre-industrial era. So only in the last 150 years have we cut the number of world's trees in half, sub half. since the industrial age. We were burning wood,
Right.
and we were creating coal and carbon, as they called it in England, and fossil fuels. And even now we're deforesting, and people are like, well, we're not deforesting. It's like, sure we are. Our urban cities it's called development.
Right.
They just cut 150 trees down just to put in a whole new apartment complex. Yeah, but they're planting new trees. Not remotely at the rate, not even at 80-20 of what was cut down because of density of trees. Trees don't just grow one tree every 30 feet like you see on a street tree strip, right? Or that public right of way, that curb area between the sidewalk and the street where trees grow. That's one tree every 30 feet. That's not a forest. That's a prison.
Right.
That's a prison. Trees grow up under each other. In a dense model, usually about 12 trees per square meter in the Milwaukee forest, if you heard of that, or the pocket forest. But that's a thicket. That's a woodland.
Right.
And that's what forests look like. But American cities deforest on average, cut down trees, if you will, for that view for your kitchen or your bedroom, or to add that addition on. We're cutting down 1.5% of our total urban forests a year. Right. Millions a year. And that's in our urban areas, just urban areas, 1.5%. So to put that in perspective, the city of Alameda, where we're sitting, it has on the books now 29,000 trees. They said 26,000 before. So 29,000 trees. We are cutting down 475 trees. And that is math in my head. So it's somewhere right around there. 475 trees a year. And that's not talking the ones we're losing to the storm.
Right.
Right? It's 450 trees a year.
And if we're lucky, we're planting 200 trees.
Or 475. No, and we're planning on the books 300. But that's only the city's responsibility, not private residents.
No, I understand that, but
and
for
that's
the
the
city,
deficit.
So even if...
And again, how many do we need to be planting a year? 14,298. So if we're losing 475 a year,
we actually have to be planting 18.
That's just how many we're losing a year. But you have to add that or subtract it from, or no, you have to add that into the 14,000 a year we have to do to make up for the deficit for the amount of trees we do and could sustain ourselves for in a climate model, and to mitigate the impacts of climate in our community, and to reforest or bring our tree canopy stock up to 30%.
Right.
So to get to that number, 100,000 trees, we need 14,000 a year, not 300 a year. We need to be planting 60 trees a day.
Right.
So that's where we are, what we need to do. It's not just achievable, it's math. And yes, we got this, we can do this. And that's why I'm so excited. Yeah. People are like, how can I be such an optimist? Because basically I'm planting apple trees every day, not just in my mind's eye, but I can see the future. So can kids.
Right.
And I know they're going to be apples, which means I'm going to have food in the future, or someone else after me, or my kids or my progeny are going to be able to eat from that tree. And that's what that tree represents: shade, life, habitat, climate, right? Water storage. Those are the easy ones. I was saying that the benefits of a tree. Carbon sequestration on average is $1 per tree. In California, $1 per tree on average, the values you get out of a tree of ecosystem services. The top 5 that cities benefit, money does grow on trees. The top 5 are carbon sequestration is about $1 per tree. And California has 9 million street trees, 9 million.
Okay.
You get $1 per tree in carbon sequestration, $2 a tree in air filtration, $5 a tree on average, $5 a tree in air, water filtration. Oh no, water storage and rainwater runoff storage. Okay. Water storage, $5 a tree. You get an energy cost shading. You get $9 a tree, almost $9 a tree. The highest returns you get of ecosystem services out of a tree is not carbon, air, water storage, or shade for electricity savings, cost savings. Right. It's property values.
That is wild.
So it's a wealth issue. Money does grow on trees. So what is that number? It's not $9 per tree that energy gives you. it's $90 per tree. That is the ratio on average. Money does grow on trees. So it's an equity issue, not just public health, but also an equity issue. Now, breaking that down for every 100,000 trees, what are returns on investment? So for planting each tree, I just gave you $1, $2, $5 for each of those ecosystem services, just those
Right.
green infrastructure services, not even the health ones. That's a completely different set of values, additional.
Right.
But just for the, we call it green infrastructure, the carbon sequestration, the air filtration, those things, and property values. For every 100,000 trees, that equates to $11.2 million. And no, I'm not doing the math. I'm remembering my slides. So it's $11.2 million per 100,000 trees. So if you're wondering where the budget comes from, you just planted it.
Right.
Why? Because you just improved the air quality in West Oakland. Your attendance rates go up at school. What does attendance rates generate per school district? Federal funding. For the amount of heads in the classrooms, you get funds per head. Your attendance rates go down, your funding goes down. Attendance goes up. Health goes up. If health goes up, health costs
go down.
You got it. West Oakland, highest rates of pediatric emergency room visits. Okay. So we have to look at nothing. The data's been there.
Right.
We just have to, if you will, start planting trees because the returns on investment are known. The financial returns on investment are right in front of us. There are no political barriers other than will.
That seems shocking to me because you break it down in such a simple, easy way. And it's between the science and the math. Like the fact that this doesn't already happen is, I said it earlier, it's asinine. Like it is, we plant trees and that heals so much other.
It heals everything.
And puts money in people's pockets. And people are always worried about their money. So like independent of the fact that we're healing and helping people and the planet, people that are greedy are going to be making the money off of it.
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing right
Like,
now.
so we just need to get them on board so that they understand it.
Well, no, you can lead a horse to water. I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
But you can lead a horse to water. No, you got to find the 80% of the willing. Or wrong. Actually, you need to find the 20% of the willing. I think it was Margaret Mead. All revolutions are led by a strong, dedicated group of individuals. Usually three. Yeah, what science and something else shows you. It's like just three people. Find your three people in your apartment building. Find your three people on your block. Find your three people in your school, at work.
Right.
Find your three people at your cafe. That's what I did. It started, I can tell you, myself, Ingrid Ballman, Sylvia Gibson, right here in Alameda. We're all part of CASA, and I literally just picked up the phone. I called Ingrid. I said, "Oh my gosh, a tree popped in my hand. Let me tell you my idea." And it started with three people. And we carried it into fruition right into the pandemic where it cut us off at the knees. But here we are now. We're helping the city of Hayward plant 342,000 trees. Wow. Our goal is planting still 100,000 trees here in Alameda. The Rotary Club is helping to lead the way. With Encino High School just powering our campaign here in the city of Alameda. These kids are great. I can't call them kids. You hear me stutter on that. I'm like, oh my God. It's the wrong term. They're not kids, but they are. I mean, God, I'm 60 years old almost next year. But don't worry. It happens to all of us.
If we're lucky enough.
Knock wood. But the kids are just driving this thing. And truthfully, I mean, I was thinking of them today. James Zoe and Lance Lee, who first started this off from Alameda High School, brought 42 kids on board the month before shut down in 2020. They created our flyer for us that we still proudly use today.
Nice.
They created our 100K Tree for Alameda flyer. They created, and they would not let me not plant trees, even though we didn't get the first one going until October 2020. They had me literally going out and talking to people during pandemic. I was just freaked out because they wanted to plant trees. They weren't on mission. It's their future. They owned it.
Right.
They owned it. And they would not let me not keep pushing the city to get a tree planting going during a smoke emergency, 100 days of a smoke emergency,
Right.
during a
wild
pandemic.
time.
And we did. We planted the first trees in Chichenyo Park. That park went from Jackson Park to Chichenyo Park that year. And we ended up planting our first 25 trees there.
Amazing.
And they planted the first one. I think they named him Oscar.
I love it.
For whatever he is, kids, but whatever, they're great.
Where are we planting trees on June 3rd?
What park? Lydecker Park over
Okay.
on Bay Farm Island. So, a dear friend who also was a colleague on CASA, our environmental task force here in Alameda, city of Alameda, Pat Potter, tireless advocate and a wonderful woman, died of age and I think also cancer, and just only last year.
Mhm.
And couldn't do anything to recognize her. Who knows? We're all coming out of Omicron. It's our
Right.
third wave in 2 years or whatever. And so this year, 3 different groups that she was involved in, 4 groups got together and have been raising funds. They've raised over $4,000
Nice.
to just pay for trees. And so we're going to plant like 22 or upwards of trees in a park and in a memorial grove
Nice.
for her. So that's going to be the Pat Potter Memorial Grove.
All right.
Yeah. So it's like June 3rd, I think.
All right.
Lydecker Park.
And anyone can find more information on this. You have a website.
About that, not that plan.
No, not that, but just if they want to get involved with
we're
the
100K
100K
trees, number 4, humanity.com, 100K trees for humanity. And also on Instagram at 100K, or maybe no, it's just 100K trees. We might just be at 100K trees. I don't know.
I can add it to the show
go
notes.
there,
Yeah.
search for us, find us.
I'll
there,
tag you
and
when I
just
put all
like
this
us,
up.
Like us, yeah.
Thank you so much for
No, and
coming.
thanks for all
giving
the
us-
accommodations and everything. And we will get greenery here for you too.
We will, yes. Well, and then we can talk about putting all the greenery in my new space too, out on Alameda Point. So that's to come.
No.
Yes.
Awesome.
So, all right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us and Amos and the 100,000 tree, 100K trees,
100K trees for
100K trees for humanity, and go plant a tree today and then find some joy. Bye.
Thank you.